Hello, welcome to part 16 of the Angular Complete series represented by tutorial polls, Directives. We can define a class as directive using a directive decorator. There are three types of directives in the Angular: components, structural directives, and attribute directives. The directive which changes the DOM layout is called the structural directive. As we can see from the name, these directives change the structure of DOM. Attribute directives change the behavior or appearance of elements. A component is the only directive that is associated with a template, so we can say a directive with a template or template URL is called a component. But if you remember, we defined a component using the component decorator, not the directive decorator. Let's open userdetail.component.ts and see here it is a component decorator. But if we navigate to component decorator using F12 and see here, it is extending the directive decorator. So component decorator is an extension of directive decorator, which adds some more functionality in the directive, for example, template and template URL properties. As you can see here, this is the reason we can add a template or template URL in the component directive. On the other hand, structural and attribute directives are defined using a directive decorator. For the sake of better readability, a naming convention is used in the directive. Structural directives have an asterisk prefix in their name, and the attribute directive is named without an asterisk prefix. Components are used as an element, but structural and attribute directives are used on elements or component to extend their functionality. We have already used a couple of these directives. Components we have created and used. Built-in directives like ng-class, ng-style we have used. Built-in structural directive we will be using in the coming lectures, for example ng-if and ng-for. Let's define our first custom attribute directive. Let's run the command ng-g-d marker. Enter. Here d is an alias for directive. You can use directive instead of d. Alright, a directive has been generated. Let's first delete this marker.directive.spec.ts. Open the appmodule.ts and see here our directive is added under declarations. Now open the marker.directive.ts and see here our CLI command has created the required class and decorated this class using a directive decorator. Notice the difference on this selector. It is wrapped inside square brackets, whereas the selector in component was not wrapped in square brackets. This is the difference in selector. When a directive has to be used as an attribute or a structural directive, wrap selector in square brackets. Also as a prefix, you see here it is an app. You can use any prefix but avoid using ng as prefix in the directive. Not only directive, anywhere, because ng is reserved for Angular. If you use ng, it might collide with the name in Angular, which will give you great trouble in troubleshooting the bug. Alright, what our marker directive is supposed to do? It will mark the text with a specific color when the supplied flag is true. Let's apply this directive to the paragraph element in userdetail.component.html. Copy the selector and paste it into the element. That's it. Your created directive is in use now. Every time you add a directive on an element, a fresh instance of directive will be created and it will be scoped to the element. The Angular directive also has event lifecycle hooks. We have seen a component's lifecycle hooks. Same hooks can be used in directive, but not all, because we know a component decorator is an extension of directive decorator. In component, we have template association, so there are a couple of hooks that are added to plug logic on different stages of the template. These view related hooks are ng after content init, ng after content checked, ng after view init, and ng after view checked are not available in directive. So let's quickly see available lifecycle hooks in directive. To save time, I have written all the event hooks available in the directive. As you can see, ng on changes, ng on init, ng do check, ng on destroy. Let's see the console. See all the hooks logged as expected, but not ng-on changes. The reason we know because we don't have any input data bound property defined. Let's remove all the defined hooks and let ng-on changes be there for now. Inside constructor, type private underscore ele_ref means element reference colon of type element ref. Using element ref injection, we can get the element reference on which directive is used. Let's also define one input property, name it is apply color as of type boolean and decorate it with input decorator. And inside ng-on init, check if it's true, then apply the color. Add condition if this dot is apply color. Inside use element reference, so this dot ele with underscore ref dot native element. This native element property is an HTML element reference. Then we can use standard JavaScript syntax to perform various operations. Let's set the color of a style, so type style.color equals blue. Now in useRTLComponent.html, pass is apply color property value. Type square brackets and is apply color and pass value as true. Save the changes and see on browser, color is set to blue. Let's add a button and bind a click handler with the value toggle color and give button text as change color. Now in userDetailComponent.ts, quickly define a property and name is color and specify the type of boolean equals true. Also define a click handler toggle color and inside this dot is at color equals not this dot is at color. Save and copy the property name. Now in HTML, pass this property instead of value. Save the changes and observe the browser. If you click on the button, you see nothing is happening. The reason is we have written our logic in ng-on init, which executed only once and sets value what it gets at the time of initialization. We know ng-on changes gets called each time when input data bound property changes. In ng-on changes type if this dot is apply color and this dot is apply color dot current value, then set the color, else color is empty. Save and check the browser. Now click on the toggle button will toggle the color. But this is not a better approach. Angular provides two more friends here, known as host listener and host binding decorator. Let's see first what is host listener decorator. Inside directive, declare a function and name it as test click listener and decorate it with host listener directive. And to host, pass the event name which you want to add a listener upon. Let's add click listener, also console log as clicked. Save the changes and see the console. When clicking on the element, see our click listener is bound and logging as expected. Let's listen to the mouse over event. Change it with mouse over. Save the changes and see the console. When hovering over the element, it's logging. Awesome. So host listeners are great to add listeners to keyboard and mouse events on elements and perform operations based on our requirement. Now let's see what is host binding. Host binding can be used to update a property value on an element based on input data bound property. It will automatically update based on property value change. So instead of checking the condition inside the element, let's use host binding. Type public space get color, open close parenthesis and open close curly braces. Now from inside, just check if is apply color is true, then return red, else return null. Now remove the ng-on changes hook. Don't forget to use get here because using get makes this function getter property and forces change detection to re-evaluate in the change detection cycle. Now let's decorate this property with host binding. So type @host binding, open close parenthesis and inside add single quote and type style.color. Our directive will add the color property in style with color what this property returns. Save the changes and see the browser. Click on the button and see it's working, right? Same way you can use class.className and just return true or false from inside the property as value to apply the class on the element. Let's create a class in userdetail.component.scss type .text -color and pass color as red. Now in directive, change this to class.textColor and from inside getter return this dot is apply color. So it will be a boolean return. Save the change and check the browser. Click and see it's changing. Also, if you see here in input property, we can pass in a name. Supplied string value here works as an alias for this property for outside, but inside the class it remains as it is. So here it will remain is apply color. Let's pass another name for outside world. So let's name it as is add color. If you will save and check on the browser, you will get an error because we are using this property in userdetail component as is apply color, but we have changed the property name for the outside world. So let's change this property name to is add color here in userdetail component.html. Save and see it is working as expected. When we have only one input property, it is good to change the input property name as the directive name for the outside world. Let's give this name as app marker. Now in userdetail component.html, instead of passing input property value explicitly, which is valid though, we can use directive as the property itself. Wrap in the square bracket and pass the property here. Now it will serve two purposes. One, attach directive. Second, bind input property. Save the changes and see it in action. It is working as expected. Let's answer one more question. Why to use attribute directive though we could have achieved the same thing in the component itself? Yes, you can, but it's not advised to do DOM manipulation or behavior change of element in the component. Then also, it increases the reusability of code and keeps your component code cleaner and readable. Alright, now you know how to create attribute directive and what all things you can achieve using attribute directive. In the next lecture, let's see what is a structural directive. That was it for this lecture. Thank you and keep watching.